Carbon. All the cool kids are riding it. At least it might seem that way. If you're a new triathlete, chances are you're riding a bike made of aluminum. That's the most common frame material for triathlon and road bikes. If you're thinking that it's time to upgrade, one of the decisions you're going to have to make is a frame material. Maybe you want to stick with aluminum. Maybe you want to look at a full carbon frame like this Quintana-Roo CDO.1. We're going to look at carbon versus aluminum frames, and we're going to see that, you know what, maybe you do want to upgrade to that full carbon frame. I bought my first good bike about 5 years ago. It's a Cervelo 1, an aluminum frame bike. I've ridden it in almost 30 triathlons. I've trained a lot on that bike, put quite a few thousand miles on it. I've gotten to know it pretty well, and as far as how aluminum feels as a material, you know what, I think I've got a pretty good idea. It feels like a bike. It's harsh when the road is harsh. It's soft when the road is soft. It responds well, and it's a good frame. It's a well-built frame. It responds well when I need to turn, and I feel it handles really well. I'm going to compare that to this Quintana-Roo CDO.1 full carbon frame. We're going to see how it handles differently, really what the differences are between the two frame materials. One thing that most people are going to ask about as a difference between the two bikes is weight. The carbon bike is lighter than the aluminum bike. When they're configured exactly the same, the carbon bike is about 3 pounds lighter. Now, on a long climb, over a 100-mile ride, is that 3 pounds going to matter? Yeah, it is. For most rides, is it going to matter for me? Well, if I have to worry about 3 pounds, I have some other areas that I can obviously concentrate on rather than the bike frame. The main difference is that carbon allows a designer to shape the frame in almost any way that they want. You'll notice it on the CDO.1, the top tube is almost flat. It's not round like on pretty much any other bike you've ever seen. The designers, probably in a wind tunnel, saw that this had a lower coefficient of drag. It went through the wind faster than just a round tube. You'll also notice that it has an aero down tube like many other bikes, like my Cervelo 1, but it also has an aero seat tube. This isn't just round. This is designed to be as aerodynamic as possible. I suppose that would be possible with aluminum, but it would be really, really hard and really expensive. Because carbon is just sheets laid on top of each other, held together with epoxy, you can do almost anything with it. Another interesting facet of the design of this bike is that you'll notice that on the right side with the chainring, the frame doesn't stick out particularly much. On the left side, see that bump? Wind tunnel testing apparently revealed that this bike is more aerodynamic with an asymmetrical frame. Fairly flat, not so flat. That is not something you can do with aluminum. Also, take a look at the head tube on my Cervelo, this aluminum frame bike. It's round. Compare that with the head tube of the CDO.1. Notice the indentation. Notice the curvature. That's wind tunnel testing. It was determined that this makes the bike more aerodynamic. It's going to slip through the air faster, easier. One very important difference between aluminum and carbon fiber is strength. The engineers designing the bike can actually align the carbon fibers in the sheets for maximum strength in different areas to withhold the stress, to withstand the stress going in different directions. I really felt going uphill on this bike that it was stiffer than the aluminum. It felt like it flexed less along the length of the bike. It felt like the bike was whipping a little bit less, like there was more power from my legs being transferred to the rear wheel. That could have been my perception only, but perception's important. I felt like I was going faster uphill on the bike. Now let's get into the area of handling and road feel. There's an awful lot of information out there on the internet about this. It's mostly opinion, It's mostly personal observations. I've seen very little scientific studies done out there about measuring an identical carbon versus aluminum frame. It's not too hard to look at. I'm not a structural engineer. I'm not a material scientist. I can't say one way or the other. If it is, it's going to be about personal preference. I rode this carbon fiber bike for a few hundred miles. I rode it in an Olympic distance triathlon in Tennessee on a very technical course, a lot of turns, a lot of up and down. It was one of those courses where you just never went straight for very long, and you certainly didn't go flat for very long. I found the bike to be incredibly responsive. It rode really well. My impression was it climbed like a goat. I love my aluminum bike. Do they handle differently? Yeah. Do I think it's because of the frame material? Honestly, I don't think so. They're two vastly different designs. The frame designs are very, very different. There are different tires on them. There's all kinds of differences that, personally, I think you could attribute the difference. They both handle very well. The big difference for me was obviously the handlebars, but even in aero, the handling was different. I didn't have a preference of one over the other as far as the frame material and how it relates to handling, how it related to comfort. When I'm sitting down there in the aero, did I feel more jolting from one over the other over very similar road surfaces? Not at all. It was pretty similar. I think that's really going to be a matter of personal preference. It's going to be because of the stiffness of the bike going up. And I gotta tell you, this carbon is pretty stiff. The vertical stiffness of this bike is really, really good. I didn't notice it bending. You know, you're gonna get a lot more stiffness based on the tire, based on the wheel, based on your handlebars, and the back on your seat. That's really going to depend more on how far back over the tire you are. The seat stays and the chain stays, where they are in relation to the wheel, where they are in relation to the seat tube. One of the main things that's going to affect your vibration going to the saddle, the seat tube. How much of it is exposed? How much of it is left in the frame of the bike? That's going to cause swing, and it's going to seriously affect how much vibration makes it to the seat. There are an awful lot of factors involved here that really are far more important than the material that the frame is made of. Will carbon chain stays, seat stays, forks help? Well, an awful lot of engineers create seat stays and chain stays and forks out of carbon because that's where the vibration is traveling. How much of that road vibration travels through the top tube, to your hands, or your backside on the saddle? Not much. It's vertical stiffness that we're worried about here, and the vertical stiffness of the frame is going to be very similar. You're going to have points of contact, your saddle, your bars, your tires, that are far more important than what's happening in the middle of the bike. My final impressions on carbon versus aluminum. Would I buy a carbon bike? Well, let me put it this way. In approximately 1 year, I hope to do my first iron distance race at the Rev 3 Tri in Sandusky, Ohio. I hope to be doing it on a Quintana Roo CDO.1 for a couple of reasons. One is I think the bike is just a work of art. It's absolutely beautiful. The designers are designing for aerodynamics, but with what's available to them via carbon fiber, they just get to make some beautiful frames. Not that aluminum bikes can't be beautiful also. With the feel of the bike going uphill specifically, that's really what sold it for me. I hope to get a carbon fiber bike in the next year or so, and it's more than likely going to be this one, this model. Is there really a difference with an aerodynamic frame like this? Well, in my last try, I got on the podium in 3rd place. 4th place was less than 5 seconds behind me.